tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
G'day everybody, welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Manners and I'm with Gav. Gav, how are you?
I'm good, Manners. Good to how's your trip down in Adelaide? Had lots of fun.
Yeah, I had a bit of free time though after lunch on day 3. The rest of the test I just spent wandering around Adelaide hoping for some more cricket. I did see the Indian cricket team a couple of times. Rishabh Pant and the boys walking to training. So India was hard at it after the test match. They were in the nets. They were working hard. Maybe the Australians could take a leaf out of their book. That I don't know. They still seem to train pretty hard, the Indians.
Well, they had, I think, Monday off, Tuesday. I think Australia got up to Brisbane a day earlier as well. So, and India also knew that, with the travel day, the weather, the inclement weather, which made the Aussies train indoors, and they were probably feeling, well, Adelaide, stay a little bit out of the spotlight when I say that. All the shift sort of focuses to Brisbane while they sort of still in Adelaide, go about their business. They've got a couple of extra days. And so it's a little more about recovery and getting into Brisbane. Just in case if the weather is bad, they can't train there. You might as well train in Adelaide and get ready for that third test.
They certainly did. Well, let's look ahead to the third test. So much on the line for this. Australia have done what everybody craved, was to level the series in their favourite test match of the summer, Adelaide with the pink ball. They have a perfect record. They're 8 from 8. But I don't see this as being a huge shift in momentum. I think the issues that were there for Australia is still there or thereabouts. And as well, I think India's fragility at the top of the order in certain spots is still there. So I think we're in for a cracker of a finish to this series. Where do you think? I think India would have been happy going to the Gabba 1-all.
Definitely. I mean, you look at this ideal schedule for Australian cricket team. Played them in Perth, then Adelaide, and then Gabba. Australia probably going on that the history and given how well Australia played these venues, you're probably looking at 3-0 series done and dusted. But it's 1-all. So yeah, India will be. It's remarkable how 1 week the spotlight's completely shifted. It's gone from is Usman going to survive to should Rohit Sharma be captain of India? Was Bumrah a better choice? So that's it's basically a matter of a week. Well, what is interesting is there've been good test matches. Let's not count it. But to be fair, I think we probably knew who's going to win the test match probably even after day one. One team was so far ahead of the other one. So I think, it would be nice to go to Brisbane and have a test match, which is enthralling for, not just that first day, but second day and even into day 3. But yeah, I think India will be quietly satisfied. 1-all, it comes down to best of 3. You could get blown away in a 5-match series, but they haven't. They're competitive. They're still in there. And, and it was only 2 weeks ago that they absolutely annihilated Australia. So there's plenty of confidence about that.
Now, talking about the captaincy debate for India, I've got a couple of thoughts on it. Firstly, I think India made a huge mistake when they moved on from Virat Kohli as test skipper. I know that's old news, but I feel that was a big mistake of theirs, and I still think they're paying for it. But I don't think you should substitute Bumrah for Sharma. Bumrah just did 1 test match. I think it's a lot easier for a fast bowler to come in and captain the odd game. But we're seeing with Pat Cummins, it is difficult for fast bowling skippers to maintain a level of success. And keep up with their bowling. And we'll get into some other issues around the fast bowling unit for Australia. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a folly to think Bumrah should be the permanent Test skipper. Not to say not a leader on the field, but I don't think the move should be made.
Well, you can argue there's probably no real succession plan. I mean, I've heard whispers that, Rishabh Pant's probably the ideal choice. But is he really ready? He was not captain Delhi Daredevils. There was, in Ranji Trophy all these years ago when I think he was only 21, he was made Delhi skipper and he stood down himself, not really ready for that responsibility. So in terms of, the Indian sort of thought process and the management, the board and selectors, they don't really see Rishabh as a leader. So if he's not the leader, who is after Rohit Sharma? And I think that's probably why that Rohit can, sort of, when I say walk around and still feel like he needs to be the man, because there's no one really pushing him off his guard. Virat's not going to come back. Ashwin's gone. Who is that guy? KL's been given, but he's not consistent. So the only person under 30 who's senior is Rishabh. And if he's not considered, well, India don't really have a choice apart from Bumrah. And, Bumrah's going to be sort of rotated around. You saw that in the New Zealand series. He's not going to go and play all the test matches. He's got to be preserved for a big 5-match series against Australia, or whether it comes against, England in 6 or 7 months' time over there. So I think Rohit Sharma is just a choice. He has to be the person. I think India's just gone through that transition. They don't know who the next person is. But I agree with you. I mean, you can't just make Bumrah the skipper because there's going to be times where Bumrah is not going to play in test matches. And then who captains then? So it's going to come back and it's going to go around in circles again.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the Indians will do with their team for the Gabba?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Rohit Sharma, for the fact that he said leading into Adelaide that we know some players are suited to certain grounds, and I thought Ashwin bowled beautifully in Adelaide. I think he did a fantastic job. But the problem with Ashwin, yes, he has 6 test centuries, might be averaging close to 28, but away from the Asia and West Indies, he's hardly averaging about 17, 18. That's not good enough, I think, to be at number 8, because India's looking for that depth. So then I think that's where these things play against Ashwin now in the later part of his career, that he's record with the bat, and India's looking for that batting depth. So if that is the case, they might, and given Gabba, it's going to be very much a fast bowling, a lot of fast bowlers are going to be bowling, then you might have to go back to Washington Sundar, who has, good memories of the Gabba from 3 or 4 years ago. So they might go back to him. But geez, it's a lot of workload again. I've mentioned that word. So given what we've seen, I think Washington Sundar comes straight in. But I wouldn't be surprised if, they go for someone like a Jadeja, and see how he goes, because it will just add a little bit more depth to the batting. He goes to 7, Reddy maybe to 8, who can, bat around the tail. And Jadeja is proven to be a master to bat around the tail. And as we've seen, if Reddy has someone to hang around, he could just convert those 40s into maybe a 70s or 80s. So watch out. I think Jadeja might be in the mix, but common sense, you probably think that Sundar comes straight in. There's talk about Akash Deep for Harshit Rana, but you can't really, given Rohit said, he played one good test match, one not a good one. How are you supposed to learn? Based on what Rohit's saying, I don't think they'll make any changes apart from those 3 fast bowlers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd like to see Jadeja in, and there was some reports that Jadeja was looking pretty happy around the nets after the Adelaide Test. I mean, I'm sure he's a happy guy, but perhaps he's been given the nod that you're going to be playing in the next Test match. And I actually think he could be a bit of a handful if reports are that the pitch will have a tinge of green and a bit of bounce in it. That is actually good for a left arm finger spinner. They can use that bounce to their advantage and a little bit of grip in the surface. So
yeah, absolutely. And Jadeja's got a really good record with the bat in the last 5-6 years outside of India. Probably, the best batters, from Rohit Sharma, Rishabh Pant, and like you talked about Pujara, you talked about Rahane, who are gone now, but Jadeja's got a better batting record than them outside of Asia. So he's a genuine all-rounder. We know what a good fielder he is. So he's a good shout, but I think given what we saw, logic probably thinks Washington Sundar come straight in.
Yeah, and I guess the other question is around Bumrah's fitness. He seemed to be cramping up during the Adelaide Test match. He then bowled a 1-over in Australia's chase where he bowled pretty slowly. Again, we probably won't know if Bumrah's fit until the toss. I think India will play this pretty close to their chest until they announce the 11. But if he is injured, that would be a big blow.
Yeah, I love the fact that, people saying, Bumrah didn't bowl at the Nets on Tuesday. Regardless of what the result was, regardless the cramp, Bumrah was never bowling in between these two tests. I think he'll probably bowl about 18, 20 balls just to make sure the body's okay, and that would be it. I mean, this guy is, he's the crown jewel of India. He's going to be in cotton wool. I don't think he bowls at all. Pretty much, like I said, maybe a max of 20, 25 balls just to make sure everything's good. And that's it. And then he goes on to Gabba. That's not a surprise, but I think he'll play. He has to play unless something's really major. I heard Damien Fleming say it looks like it might be a little bit more than a cramp, but then I'm sure India would have just taken him off and not even have bowled that 1-over.
Yeah, absolutely. They wouldn't have even brought him out onto the field if there was any little niggle with what 19 needed. I mean, why would you risk making it worse? So I agree with that assessment. Then looking at the Australian team now, I guess they're going to probably go in with the same team with just the only change being Hazelwood for Boland if Hazelwood is fit. I can't see them making any other changes now. Mana saved his spot. Bo Webster, the all-rounder, I think we'll have to wait until perhaps this, Melbourne or Sydney if he's to get a game at all, because I think with this big layoff between the test matches, the fact that Australia won so quickly, they won't be so worried about having Webster there, so they won't drop Pat Cummins' best mate, Mitch Marsh. There's no way they'll do that. I think Australia will be pretty much as is unless Hazelwood's fit, and then he'll replace Boland.
Yeah, would they take that risk though? I mean, it's because it's one of those injuries. Hearing Hazelwood, he said it's not he bowls and then it's cooling off and then bowling again and then sort of cooling off, and then when he tries to bowl again, maybe third or fourth spell, that's when it seems to trigger. And then if it happens again, he could be out for 4 or 5 weeks. Now, I don't know. There's speculation Pat Cummins might not even go to that one or play one of those test matches in Sri Lanka because it's the birth of his second child. So Australia probably need Hazelwood there. Who do you pick? If they're, but I think Australia will err in the side of caution here. I think given what Boland's done, unless the conditions, you got to remember Gabba, it's muggy. You look at the temperature, it's pretty much 32, 33 for those 4-5 days. I just can't see Australia taking a risk with Hazelwood in those conditions. So I think they'll stick with Boland. I think Hazelwood has to be supremely fit and ready to go. I don't think Australia would take that chance.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning to as well, that I think, and you put those things together that we just spoke about. If they're going with Hazelwood, are they willing to risk it when they don't really have another bowling option? Marsh, we've seen it. He can't bowl much. So if Hazelwood were to go down in this test match, Marsh can't pick up those overs. He can do a few, maybe 5, 6, 7 a day, but that's about it. So it is a big risk. The only thing that I counter to that is in all Hazelwood's discussions, he said this isn't as serious as other side injuries he's had in the past. They've monitored it and looked after it really well, and he's tracking much better than he has in the past. But yes, exactly right. If he goes in with any doubt and then does it again, then he misses the rest of the series. And you're right, he could miss Sri Lanka and beyond. So a lot riding on it, but we'll know more today. So we're recording this Thursday. I think Hazelwood had a big bowl over the last couple of days, and they're going to see how he pulls up. But other than that, I think Australia will just go in with the same 11 and roll the dice again.
Yeah, a bit of focus. It's funny because I watched some clips of Steve Smith batting in the nets, and one of Steve Smith's, and having covered a lot of cricket, watched him in the nets closely. one of his greatest strengths is sort of not getting that sort of bat in front of the pad, meaning it, and just feel like in leading up to Adelaide, saw a few clips and I messaged one of my friends and one of the journalists and I said, well, Smithy just looks out of touch, that finding his hands or whatever he calls it seems to be just playing a lot more in front and getting. So I don't know about Steve Smith. I think there's a bit of pressure on him. And suddenly Marnus is off the spotlight. Maybe Smithy's more on the spotlight. Uzi's sort of gone under the radar. But again, there's probably more pressure on India now again with that batting order. But like we've said throughout, when we did our grand preview at the start of this thing, the team that bats better is going to win. I think both bowling units probably cancelled themselves out, if you can say that. But yeah, I think the focus is on a lot more on India again, and I think it's pretty much, Menners, whichever team, bats 80 overs for first time along, whoever bats first and whoever makes it to the 80 over stage will probably win this test match again at the Gabba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I don't think there was much between the two teams. I mean, Travis Head played another outstanding innings, chanced his luck. You take that out, and I think that Adelaide test is a lot closer. I also don't think, and I posed this in the review of the test. If I'm India, I don't know why I ever play another pink ball test in Australia again, unless they're going to play more in India and get better at the pink ball. It just seems to me Australia have such a huge advantage. For example, I think this ball was swinging too much for Bumrah. He just couldn't control it on that first night.
Well, I don't think he bowled. I mean, one of the reasons why Stark's got a great record is you look at the pitch maps over and nobody has bowled as full as Mitchell Stark has. So generally, the fuller you bowl, and I think he's got actually better because he bowls at that. He's not bowling it at that 155 what he was 6-7 years ago. He's probably around that 100 mid 140s or high 140s, which is probably the optimum pace for swinging the ball, they reckon. So if you see him, I thought that pitch was a little bit strange. There were some little horizontal sort of grass strips and stuff. But one thing I do want to mention is Australia have figured out, I think, on how to bowl to Jaiswal, and I think they know how to bowl to Rishabh Pant, and maybe even KL Rahul as well. I thought so. That's the beauty of this series. 2 tests in, and I think bowlers have started to figure out what the batters are doing. And I think Australia are going to bowl a lot more over the wicket and bowl it around that sort of blind spot of Jaiswal, around that leg stump, and then push the ball across him and just make him play around that off stump and rather than sort of go around the wicket, because I think he's a lot more side on. He's going to get squared up. So I think Boland's delivery is going to be a big template for Australia going to the next 3 tests. Rishabh Pant, I think Marnus made a really good point. I think it was on ABC where he said for Rishabh, because all we can do is draw him forward and make him play with a vertical bat. If we can do that, he's going to, and you saw 3 of his dismissals have come in that sort of manner. So Pant, KL Rahul, I think they feel like short ball, into his armpit. But it has to be not overly done. Surprise him. I think the plans are very well set now for the Indian top order. That's why I feel the Australia is just tightening the noose a little bit. And I think that's why I reckon they'll choke the Indian batting again at the Gabba.
Yeah, they said it looks like it's going to be a green top at the Gabba. Just on Rishabh Pant. I mean, I just don't think he wants to play another defensive shot all series. I mean, that was an extraordinary innings in Adelaide, where in the second innings where he charged the first ball and then he was sort of slogging in the first over of the third day when India was trying to put up a score. So yeah, good luck trying to get him to play with a vertical bat defensively for the rest of this series.
Well, the other thing as well that stood out for me for Rishabh Pant, and I was checking with the Indian camp, was how he was very timid behind the stumps. When the Fox mic was on, the stump mic, we didn't hear a lot of Rishabh. We heard him maybe for that first hour on day 2, but that was it. I think that's got to change now. Whether that's because Rohit Sharma's back in, I'm not sure. He was given probably that role to speak up a little bit with Bumrah at helm. I'm not sure. But I saw very timid Rishabh Pant, very quiet Rishabh Pant. I think India need to change that. I think he brings that energy. When I say that, it's not that intent. It's just a bit of larrikin in Rishabh. Make those couple of jokes. We heard that constantly on the stump mic in Perth, but we didn't hear it at all in Adelaide. So just checking with, a couple of sources in Indian camp, they feel there's nothing to it. He's fine. But, clearly.
Maybe he's taking a leaf out of Carey's book.
Yeah. Well, maybe, I don't think he's 100%. That knee's still giving him trouble, no doubt about it. But 80% Rishabh Pant is, still the best keeper in India. But I found that quite intriguing.
The other thing actually about the Indian team that came out, Rohit Sharma said in the post-match press conference that Shami is still getting a little bit of swelling in his knee after bowling. So they're not going to rush him back into Test cricket if that's the case. So I think Shami playing in this series is getting less and less likely.
Yeah, there was a report going on where Rohit and Shami actually met after the first Test in New Zealand, because Shami was at the National Cricket Academy in Bangalore and they had a bit of a heated exchange. I'm not sure about that. But look, even Bumrah in that first press conference after leading into Perth, they said he's not here and, he's a good bowler, but he has to get fit, almost implying that India's already gone into this Test series knowing that Shami's not going to be there. And Bumrah knows that his role is more vital. And Rohit probably echoed those thoughts. So there's a lot of, every time it seems like India, somebody bowls a bad spell, it's where is Shami? Where is Shami? But I don't know. I think the earliest, he's not going to play in Brisbane. You're probably playing him, but he hasn't had any 4-day cricket. So, 5-day cricket. So I think India's started to look beyond Shami for this series. That is my gut feel.
Yeah, sounds to me the same thing. Well, I guess that's it for all the preview stuff. You mentioned Usman Khawaja before. I think it's a really big match for him at the Gabba. He'd love to get a score. He's averaging in the 20s this year in Test cricket. He's going to be 38 very soon. At some stage, Australia need to move on from Usman, and it's just how soon is that going to be? And, if he doesn't score at the Gabba, that pressure will, really multiply to the MCG. And then, maybe Usman farewells Test cricket at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Maybe he gets the tap on the shoulder, Uzi, you're done. Because Australia need to regenerate this team. George Bailey cannot sit on his hands anymore.
I knew you would have to have a dig at Bailey or coming somewhere on this podcast. But look, my bet was I thought Khawaja looked good again. I think, he survived the Bumrah spell. It was the last ball of Bumrah's sixth over that he nicked off. He's done all the hard work. So I think his score's coming somewhere. And I think Khawaja goes to Sri Lanka. I know I really genuinely do because, perhaps Travis Head opens, but you look at last year in India, who was our best batter, and that was Usman Khawaja. And I think he's figured out how to play spin. So I think Uzi actually goes to Sri Lanka. What happens after that, I'm not sure, unless he has a terrible, terrible next 3 tests. But
that's what I think. Yeah, I agree with you. If he does well and gets a couple of scores, I think they'll at least give him to the end of this World Test Championship cycle.
Yeah, I think when you say scores, I think we're still stuck in the past a little bit, like you, me, and a lot of people. When they say scores, we're probably expecting 200s, But given the way the series is being played, like you look at Marnus to 63, very important. It might not show up as 140 or 100. 63 is McSweeney's 39, very important. KL Rahul's first innings 29 for India in the first test, very important. We're having that type of test series where a 62 or a 60 or even a 45 is integral, because that 45 with some other set batters getting a team to 250, 300, which, as we've seen in the first 2 tests, is probably a match-winning score.
Yeah, no, you're right. But he'll need a couple of those scores. I guess the last thing I want to end this preview podcast with is, Gav, the World Test Championship ladder is well and truly alive now for India and Australia. It seemed like India were going to struggle after getting spanked by New Zealand, but then South Africa have done India and Australia favour. They've beaten Sri Lanka. So now South Africa have gone to the top. New Zealand have lost to England, ruling them out. So now actually there is some measure of control here for India and Australia. Either of these teams, if they could go on and dominate the rest of this series, can pretty much lock in a World Test Championship final spot. Now, it's complicated because South Africa haven't played their final series yet, so we don't know the exact permutations. But basically, India or Australia dominate this series, they can lock that spot away, which for India, obviously, they need to because there's no more cricket for them after this series. But for Australia, they've got going to go to Gaul to play 2 test matches. They're going to be turning square from ball 1. So Australia's best chance at retaining their title is to go on and dominate the rest of this home series and pretty much lock away a World Test Championship final spot, which didn't seem possible a while ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after they lost that first test match. I think India losing 3-0 has probably extinguished all their hopes of reaching there, to be honest. But what's going to be cracking is that Pakistan-South Africa series. You probably can't even name the top 6 for South Africa in terms of, apart from Markram and Bavuma and so forth. They're not, the big names. Pakistan, they've dropped Babar Azam. They probably don't have big names as well, but 2 excellent bowling units there as well. So I genuinely give, Pakistan a little bit of chance in that series. So it's not like, you're right. The World Test Championship is well and truly, open. I think Australia's still favourites to get there, to be honest. I think they will. I think they'll win 2 test matches here, and I think they'll win 1 in Sri Lanka, and that will be enough. But yeah, you're right. It's going to be an intriguing finish. I think India's, it's going to require a miracle. I don't see India winning, 3 tests. I think they need to win 3 and then still have results go their way and so forth. So can't see that really happening.
So what's your pick for the Gabba then, Gav? Who are you tipping?
I think Australia. Like I mentioned, I think the Australian bowlers, they've got the top 6 now. You don't even need to go through the video analysis and blah, blah, blah. I think all of them know how to bowl. As I mentioned to you, Menez, very surprised that India didn't take on Boland. I think they can't get stuck against Scotty Boland. I know he's a great bowler, but if they get stuck again and if he plays at the Gabba, I think India are in for a tough time.
I agree they've got to take him on. Well, I'm glad you predicted Australia because there was a lot of complaints. I received a lot of complaints about you sitting on the fence for your last prediction. So I'm glad you've gone in on Australia to win. I'm going to say India to go ahead 2-1 in the series. Ooh. I think Bumrah will be better with the red ball. I disagree. I agree that Australia may have worked out some of the Indian batters, but I don't think Australia's batting is out of the woods. And I still think there's concerns there. So I think it's going to be another famous Indian victory at the Gabba. We will be here to review it all. So at the end of every day, we'll be releasing a podcast. Hopefully, Gav will be able to join me for some of those. A bit more of a friendly time now that we're back on the East Coast and not playing late. So should work out a bit better for Gav and his newborn. But yeah, we'll be back at the end of every day. Losing my voice. All right. Thanks for tuning into the Cricket Unfiltered podcast, Gav. Take care and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Matt. Talk soon.